I've been getting this question pretty often. People are saying, hey Jay, what books should I be reading outside of the periods of time when I'm studying for the CFA exams to either help prepare for next year's exam or to improve my abilities in the future to hopefully pass them? Here they are. Those are the only books that are going to help you. Whew. But seriously, I will share a few books here that I think can kind of help you build a knowledge foundation. Honestly though, none of these books are really going to help you prepare and increase your chances of passing any of the CFA exams other than the CFA curriculum books that I just showed you. Just because of the nature of the CFA exams, they're so analytical, they're so specific and targeted on certain formulas or economic theories or ethical decisions, that you're not going to get the exposure that you need to those specific formulas or problem-solving techniques in any novels or third-party finance content. It truly is just the CFA material, also including third-party test prep provider study notes, that are going to improve your chances of passing the exams. That being said, I know that there are a lot of you who watch these videos that never want to stop, and in the 4 or 6 months when you're not studying for the CFA exams, you want to be doing something that could potentially improve your ability of passing next year's exam. So if you're truly a grinder like that and you just want to be reading and learning all year long, or if you're just kind of interested in finance-related books, then here are a few I think you might check out. Number 1 on my list is the only book that I actually do think could build a foundation towards helping you pass the CFA exams. Now that does not mean actually teaching you the material that'll help you answer questions right on the exams. Even though it's cliche, what I mean by foundation is it'll just introduce you to some financial concepts so that you already have a slight understanding of what those are in your mind before you actually start getting to the CFA material. That way, once you're reading through the equity book or the fixed income book in the CFA material or your test prep provider's material, you'll already be familiar with what some of the concepts are that they're talking about, because the book I'm recommending, which is Security Analysis by Ben Graham, is one of the most famous books of all time at teaching individuals about more basic valuation concepts. Security Analysis by Ben Graham was, I think, written in like the 20s or 30s, but it has multiple editions and it's been revised many times throughout the years, so just look for the one that's most recent. If you've never heard of Benjamin Graham before, the reason that he and his book Security Analysis became wildly famous and popular in the finance industry is because of Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett has said it over and over again, but the only reason that he ever became the investor that he is today is because of the teachings that Ben Graham passed off onto him when Warren was in college, I think in the 50s. So it's really interesting to have some background information on Warren Buffett and the type of stocks he likes to buy, just well-known blue chip, usually value companies. Coca-Cola is a good example. And then when you get into security analysis and you start to read through some of the strategies that Ben Graham teaches when valuing securities, mostly stocks, but also bonds, you see exactly where Warren Buffett is coming from in a lot of his decision making and why he's been able to become the multi-billionaire, at some points the world's richest man. And it's not just Warren Buffett. There are many large value mutual funds and hedge funds out there that use the strategies primarily taught by Ben Graham, all listed out in Security Analysis, to become world-renowned investors. Maybe the next most famous case is Bill Ackman at Pershing Square Hedge Fund. One of his rules is that whenever anyone starts to work at the fund with him, they have to read Security Analysis along with a handful of other books. I assume most of them probably would have by that point to get into a really prestigious hedge fund. They're somewhere in the middle part of their finance career. So even if you want to get better at investing on your own outside of information in the CFA program, Security Analysis can be a great book to read. Again, reading this book is not going to teach you how to answer any questions correctly on the CFA exam. You could read the entire book, memorize the whole thing, and still score 33% on any of the CFA exams, the multiple choice, when there's 3 options, meaning you just guessed randomly on all of them. So it can only help you build a foundation towards some of the background concepts of valuations of stocks and bonds. You are certainly going to have to learn everything needed to pass the CFA exams in the CFA curriculum material. The next book on my list is Flash Boys by Michael Lewis. It's all about high-frequency trading and algorithmic trading on Wall Street today. I'm really biased in including this on my list. It certainly is not going to help you out in passing any of the CFA exams, but it is super interesting, and you'll learn a lot about how trading and how Wall Street and how the finance industry works underneath the hood once you get through this book. It's my favorite book that I've ever read, so I recommend it to people all the time, and especially if you're, waiting 4 months before you're going to start studying again for the next level of the CFA program. Flash Boys could be a really cool one to get into. Everyone knows Michael Lewis is an amazing writer, and so the story is really interesting, and then additionally he presents it in a really interesting way, but it's also very educational to see exactly how people started to learn about what the big banks on Wall Street the type of advantage that they had in the trading markets because of their physical closeness to the computers that route orders through the New York Stock Exchange. And when more and more people started to learn about that, how competitive the physical geography towards those computers became. High frequency trading is a really crazy concept. It dominates a lot of the volume in today's markets. And if you are in any position that has to do with securities or investing, you'll probably get the question a handful of times in your career, if not a handful of times every year, where people are curious about how orders are actually executed, how their order might fall in line with the order flow, where these orders are getting routed to, who takes them, how shares get exchanged, things like that. It is really confusing. I've read Flash Boys twice, and I certainly don't have a deep understanding of how all these things work, but you see how dirty that industry became for a little while, or maybe still is, depending on how you look at the situation. I know people at the banks engaging high frequency trading would tell you that they're providing liquidity to the markets, which is also true. So it's not like it's an evil thing, but they make a ton of money off it in really short periods of time with no risk in most situations. Anyway, super cool book, really cool story. It teaches you a lot about financial markets. I would recommend Flash Boys to almost anyone. The last book on my list is more similar to the first because it's very educational, and that is going to be A History of Monetary Policy in the United States by Milton Friedman. I had this book gifted to me when I was an intern, and at the moment that it was handed to me, I was very appreciative. I read through the first 50 pages out of about 400 or 500, and I couldn't understand anything I was reading. And then I kind of felt like not insulted, but just like the gift was a waste because it was like I was reading another language. I had no idea what I was looking at. It really gives a very detailed look into monetary policy through every period of time since about 1860 in the United States. And that's where it starts off. So these first 50 pages, I was reading about monetary policy in the 1860s, 70s, and 80s. And I was totally lost. So I was really excited to read the book again once I passed all 3 levels of the CFA exam because I felt like, hey, maybe I'm smart enough now to understand what I'm looking at. I got back into the book. It's the paperback version. It is a really valuable book if you actually have one. So maybe buy it on ebook or something if you're considering it because I think it's a couple $100 to buy the physical copy. So it was a little bit worn and torn because I had stashed it away in a closet for like 5 years. But anyway, I read through about 3/4 of it, and then the last quarter of it I kind of skimmed. I picked up on maybe 33% of the material in that book after passing the CFA exams. It is extremely dense and difficult to read. I'm sure there are people out there who can read and do read this book and gain a lot of knowledge from it. Milton Friedman was a genius in his presentation of all this monetary policy, but it's just so dense for someone like myself who's not necessarily all that interested in monetary policy. Then it makes it tough to be super interested in. Plus, a lot of the terminology and language they used is, from 100 years ago. You're kind of Googling things all the while and, writing some notes along the sides of the book when you get to those concepts that you haven't heard before. At least that's what I was doing. Definitely tough to follow, but man, is it informational and really cool once you start to understand the reasoning for why we went to the gold standard and then why we left the gold standard and all the background that motivated those big decisions. The reason I'm recommending this book to people is because we're in a really unique period of time in relation to monetary policy. If you choose to read this book and you look at it through the lens of where we are at now, what Janet Yellen and Jerome Powell have done with the monetary policy in the United States now, it is nothing like the last 150 years that the book covers. And I, the entire time reading this book, wanted so badly to get Milton Friedman's perspective on what we're doing today, what our Federal Reserve has been doing today, and what that is going to mean for the future, for financial markets, what direction the markets will be going, and for the future of our economy. I'm recommending this book because I honestly believe if you could read it well enough to understand everything it gets at and compartmentalize all that information, then you could look at our monetary policy in the United States today and make a really educated decision on the direction of financial markets. I think someone could make a ton of money making big bets on macroeconomic factors based on our monetary policy. And that book holds the information you would need to make a bet like that. I'm certainly not the one to do it. So I hope that someone watches this video and is smart enough to read through the whole book and comes to some genius realization of where we're at now relative to history and can formulate what will happen to our economy now based on where we were at in monetary policy and history and what happened to our economy then. And just makes, a huge trade off of this or invests clients' money in a really smart way, maybe runs a hedge fund and makes a decision off it. I think this is a really underrated book. Number one, because of the amount of content and information that's inside of it. But number two, because of how practical the applications of a deep understanding of those concepts could be. I literally think you could become a billionaire if you could somehow create a formula around how financial markets will react to our current standards of monetary policy, which is just unlimited stimulus. And it's driving asset prices way up the roof for now, which is great. I'm happy about it. My 401k is doing fine. Roth IRA, we're great. I'm concerned about where we might be in 10, 20, 30 years from now because of the amount of debt we've taken on in the United States and because of how loose the monetary policy has been. Interest rates are still zero. Things like that we've never seen before. Man, I wish we had Milton Friedman to tell us all about it. But we do. I say that kind of honestly, but I keep forgetting the fact that we do have his groundworks and the lens that we need to look through to analyze where our current monetary policy is at, to figure out what he thinks, what very likely could happen to our economy and financial markets. It's in that book. If you're a genius or if you're smarter than me, get into it, learn it, and report back to me on your findings, what you think might happen. I would really appreciate that. If you've gotten to this point in the video, it means you watched the whole thing, and I am so thankful for you doing that. Increasing watch time helps out the YouTube algorithm a lot, more so than anything else, I believe. Another thing that can help is if you like this video, subscribe to the channel. Those are both also greatly appreciated by me, and if you want to support me on Patreon, you can see the link to my Patreon account in the description, I guess down below. As always, thanks for watching.